But what I'd like to do is move on to the next session, which we call the Energy Scene Setter, and we invite someone every year to come and deliver a little bit about where the world of energy is, statistically and otherwise, and where it might be going. And we're very, very happy this year to have Adam Sieminski with us. He's been here before, back in 2009, so not 1859, but 2009, right? And Adam is here with his entire body from his company, his organization. He's currently senior advisor to the board of KAPSARC, an energy-focused advisory think tank based in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, where he previously served as president from 2018 to 2021. And the president of KAPSARC, Fahad Al-Ajlan, is here with us today, as well as his colleague Brian. Before that, he held the James Schlesinger Chair for Energy and Geopolitics at the Center for Strategic International Studies, where he was a non-resident expert. From 2012 to 2017, he was the administrator of the U.S. Energy Information Administration, the EIA, and prior to that, he served as Senior Director for Energy and Environment on the U.S. National Security Council. He's very, very deeply involved in the energy world. You can find lots about him online. I'm not going to take up any more time. I'm going to let Adam take the floor and give us his take on where energy is and where it might be going. Thank you very much. Come on up, Adam.
Okay, I don't need this. Thank you, Andrew, for the very kind introduction. And to Mike Somers, that's a tough act to follow. So KAPSARC, as I said, is a think tank and advisory group in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. And I was thinking about the history of the Drake Well. Fahad and I were reading a panel at the transit building last night that said the daily production of the Drake Well was a gallon per hour. So that's about 1 barrel every 2 days. And Fahad had a little difficult time understanding that because the Ghawar field in Saudi Arabia produces almost 4 million barrels a day. A little difference, and I think it shows you how the oil industry has changed over time. So, are there slides that you can bring up? So just click. Okay, so which one is it I'm going for? There we go. All right. First, I thought I would give you. So which way do I have to point it? The forward button, the forward arrow, right? There we go. All right, so let's go back. A lot of people have 30 or 40 years of experience. I only have 10 years of experience. And if this clicker would work, 7 times. All right, so what are the 7 times of 10 years experience that I have? Mike talked about this earlier. So there's just a little bit of a delay. I grew up in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, which is about a 3-hour drive east of here. And I got my driver's license in 1963. The first gallon of gasoline that I bought cost 30 cents. So that's a lot different. But you know, if you adjust for inflation between 1960s and now, it's about $3 a gallon, which is what we're currently paying. That's kind of a remarkable thing, too, when you think about it, that the price of gasoline hasn't really changed all that much. This was the period of disruptions. The embargo in 1973-74, the Iran-Iraq War in 1979-80, and oil in real terms got up to over $100 a barrel. Compared to today's prices. Then we had the diversification. So people started using lots of other fuels other than oil. And demand for oil began to go down. And during the 1980s, particularly after 1986, we had a real drop in the price of oil. that led us into what I call the period of the internet, 1990s. Oil wasn't doing much of anything. Energy was kind of static. And everybody was focused on the beginnings of the internet. Then in 2000s, we had a remarkable resurgence of growth in oil demand all around the world, particularly in China, where demand was growing by more than 1 million barrels a day in just one country, over the period 2004 to 2008. We then had the shale revolution that dominated the period from 2010 to 2020. We have the transition that we could say might have started in the 2020s. We'll see where we're going. It's kind of interesting. We're back to about $60 a barrel. Okay, so. And those are my 10 years worth of experiences 7 times, by the way. So why does it do this? I sometimes have a prop, but if you look in an economics textbook, it'll give you supply and demand curves, and this is the price, and this is the quantity, and they talk about widgets, and widgets are always very elastic. A small change in price or quantity gives you, small changes. So quantity can shift around, and you just get small changes in prices is the way to think about it. For oil, the curves are a lot steeper. They look, instead of being flat like this, the curves are very steep. And what that says is for a small change in quantity, 1 million barrels a day change in demand or supply can make a huge difference in the price. And that's what has always led to the issues associated with gasoline that motivate the politicians to want to look at changes in legislation and regulation. So here's some supply chain interruptions that I just listed over the course of my career. I mentioned 73 and 74, oversupply in 1986, China demand growth, global recession in 2009, Hurricane Sandy in 2012. There was no gasoline available in New York and New Jersey, and there was a huge effort on the part of the government to change that. Shale revolution in North Dakota and Texas, the Marcellus in Pennsylvania for natural gas. Everybody remembers COVID and the huge drop in demand. We had almost, it was like a 10 million barrel a day drop in demand. And then the supply chain interruptions in the Ukraine in 2022, Russian oil. This one is interesting. The attack on Abqaiq and the elimination of 5-6 million barrels a day of crude from the market. You know how much oil changed? I don't know, maybe $1 a barrel. There were headlines that said oil was going to go to $200 a barrel, and it didn't. We'll come back to what the reasons were for that. In fact, let's talk about it right now. This is a paper that was done at KAPSARC, peer-reviewed, published in the Energy Journal. And what that peer-reviewed paper says is that the market management of OPEC has shaved the peaks and the valleys off of these wild variations that we get in the price of oil. So that OPEC's market management has actually had a positive effect on GDP, because economists will tell you that excess volatility is not good for the markets, that there are economic losses associated with excess volatility. And what OPEC has managed to do over a good portion of the period that we looked at KAPSARC back to 2001. So by shifting prices to be less volatile, OPEC has actually helped the global economy. Let me pause for just a second and say I'm citing KAPSARC research here, and I lived in Saudi Arabia for 5 years, but I'm speaking not on behalf of KAPSARC or Saudi Arabia. These are my opinions, but I strongly believe that OPEC gets a bad rap on market management techniques. And in fact, I think as we move out over the next year or so, that we're going to see OPEC continuing to play a positive role in doing that. So Mike talked about this. Let me just show you some data. This is from a while ago, but it's still true. Growth in places like India probably are going to begin to supplant the growth that we've seen over the past 20 years in China. Eurasia. So the world is going to need more energy and more oil. The OECD countries might not need as much energy per unit of GDP growth. But the overall trend globally is that economic growth needs energy to fuel it, and oil is part of that. So looking at this data, what this says is that oil demand relative to GDP still has a very strong relationship, and that any growth of GDP above roughly 2% is in GDP global is going to lead to growth in demand for petroleum. So even if global GDP slows down in 2025 and 2026 relative to 2024, and that's kind of what the IMF and the World Bank and many other forecasters are suggesting, as long as it doesn't fall below 2%, we're still going to see growth in oil. So the forecasts are kind of changing from growth in the low 3% range to maybe 2.9% growth. So 0.2 or 0.3 percentage points drop is what people are saying going into next year, and that is still going to require more demand for petroleum than a lot of the doomsayers are suggesting. So that graph there probably is something that would look pretty good today, but let me tell you that that was from 2017, 2018. Up at the top, it says one of the largest forecasts for oil demand growth came from the International Energy Agency in Paris when they were still using a current policies case. Sometime in the next couple of weeks, the IEA is going to publish its 2025 global energy outlook, and they will have in it a current policies case for the first time in 5 years. It's probably going to show demand for oil in 2050 in the neighborhood of 110 to 114 million barrels a day. This chart comes from IHS Market, Dan Yergin's group, former CIRA. Basically what it is a supply curve for crude oil. And what it suggests is that at an increase in demand for petroleum of somewhere between 18 to 24 million barrels a day, and that's how much you would need to replace decline plus the additional growth that is required to get you to 2050, that oil prices probably have to going to be in the range of about $75 a barrel in today's dollars. So oil currently trading roughly $60 to $65 a barrel. Actually, it's going to slow down investment in shale in the U.S. And that spare capacity that exists in OPEC is going to be a valuable thing to have again. Final slide. What could change the consensus outlook? This is like that big long paragraph that you always see, either at the beginning or the end of a lot of presentations. It says, these are forecasts, they're subject to change. Economic developments, population growth trends, innovations in things like transportation, efficiency. That reminds me too about the difference between efficiency and conservation. Lee Raymond, when he was the head of ExxonMobil some time ago, was speaking at a meeting that I was at, and I got to sit to him next to dinner. I said, Lee, you keep talking about efficiency. I hear other people talking about conservation. And I said, how do you see the difference between those two concepts? And Lee, in his kind of gravelly voice, said, efficiency is what we do that makes sense. And he said, conservation is what the government tells us to do. I've heard that quite a bit here in Pennsylvania in the last couple of days. You know, electric vehicles, I think we're still going to see electric vehicles. You know, all we need is a breakthrough in battery technology, and we're going to see that. That doesn't mean that petroleum is going to go away, because there are going to be a lot of people in the world that are still going to want gasoline, powered cars, and diesel vehicles. Utility grids need a lot of help. Again, you've heard plenty about that. I think that we're still going to see a lot of emphasis on trying to control emissions, including carbon dioxide. And that's why in Saudi Arabia, for example, they're talking about something called the circular carbon economy, which says that you can reduce, reuse, and recycle different emissions, including carbon dioxide. But to complete that picture, what you really need to think about is removal, and removal could be biological removal, things like trees, mangroves, ocean, algae, and other things, but also technical solutions like direct air capture, carbon storage, and others. And I think that it's going to be important that industry stays in that slot that says progress is going to have to take place. Even as we use more oil and natural gas, we are going to have to find ways to reduce the emissions associated with the combustion of those fuels. So this list I've been keeping for some time. The only thing that I've added to this in the last 10 years of my experience is artificial intelligence. So I didn't have that on this list 8 years ago. It might have made it 2 years ago. It's definitely on the list now. The use of artificial intelligence, I think, could, not only is it going to be energy intensive because of the electricity requirements, but I think that it is going to make a big difference in terms of things like finding solutions to carbon direct air capture with using artificial intelligence to explore different catalysts and other kinds of fuels. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to give back a little bit of the time that we lost with the later start.
That's okay. Is this on? Great. Does anybody have any questions for Adam? You're going to get a lot of chance to do a lot of FaceTime with him today. So, and he's been here many times. So you'll probably find him back meandering through the museum, looking at different things and contemplating the future. But anybody? Any questions? You all want a break? I guess so. Okay. Anyways, please give Adam a round of applause. Thank you, Adam. Much appreciated. Okay. So that was a very, very busy morning. What we're going to do is we're going to take a 15-minute break now. Be back here at around 10:15. We are then at some point going to invert the seats, and everything is going to be with that in the background. We had to roll the dice this morning concerning the weather, and I think now we're going to be able to save your corneas. So see you back here in 15 minutes. You find food and coffee still off to the left, my left.